Are we ready, Jerry?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Okay, I will call this meeting to order. It's 12 o'clock. I'd like to read a statement as authorized by Utah Code 52-4-207. This meeting is being held electronically without an anchor location to reduce the risk to the health and safety of COVID-19 by limiting in-person participation. We will go ahead and do a roll call first. So here we go. Board Member Booth. Board Member Cannon.
I'm here.
Hi, Miss Janet. Board Member Klein.
Here.
Hello, Nellie. Vice Chair Davis. Board Member Earl.
I'm here.
Hi, Jenny. Board Member Hanson. Board Member Hart.
Hello.
Hello, Miss Molly. We are going to excuse Chair Huntsman for this meeting. Board Member Hutchings.
I'm here.
Hi, Stacy. Board Member Hymas.
Here.
Hi, Matt. Board Member Lear.
Here, and can I add that on my screen at 12:30, there'll also be a young lawyer that I'm mentoring. So she wanted to see this in action, and I knew we'd be well behaved. Thank you.
And so you're in the same room, Carol?
Yes.
Oh, what's her name?
Name is Amelia Fenn.
Hello, Miss Amelia. Welcome.
Not here yet. She'll be here at 12:30.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Board Member Moss.
Here.
Hi, Jim. Board Member Norton.
Here.
Hello, Kristen. Board Member Straight.
Here.
Hi, Brent. Board Member Booth. Vice Chair Davis. Board Member Hanson.
I'm here. Hello.
Hi, Scott. Okay, so I just because our meetings are so short during the legislative period, I just want to remind us, if we can, when we're reading the bills, if we could try and speak once so that everyone has opportunity to ask their questions, that would be most helpful. Not required, but just a request. So we are able to, because we have a quorum. So number 2 is I'd be seeking a motion to approve the minutes from February 10th, 2022.
So moved. Lear.
Second.
Board
Hart.
Member Hart, thank you. So the motion is that the board approves the minutes of its February 10th, 2022 meetings. Any discussion to that motion? Carol, I'm not coming back to you for discussion. Okay, please vote. I see that voting is unanimous, and I also see Board Member Booth. Hello, Randy.
Good morning.
Thank you. Okay, we will go ahead and go on to number 3, which is our budget priorities. So I think we're turning the time. Dale, are you taking this?
Madam Chair, School Finance Director Sam Urey here. We'd like to excuse Deputy Superintendent Jones, who's up on the hill, but I'll head up this item if that pleases the chair.
Yep.
Great. We largely are where we were at this point last week. We are anticipating the final revenue estimates at any point now in the future. So I will note that items are attachments in the backups. Items numbers 2, 3, and 4 are unchanged from last week. We did add item number 1. It is 60 pages long, and we won't have a quiz at the end, but wanted to just make board members aware that is there. PEA, Public Education Appropriations Subcommittee, has put together a more detailed summary of their recommendations to the Executive Appropriations Committee. With that, really, we know you have a lot to do with bills. So we're happy to answer any questions, but at this time, the budget priorities are largely unchanged from last week.
I don't see any hands. Thank you, Sam. Thank you for doing that. I think we're going to turn some time over to Jeffrey Van Holt. Jeff, what is your title, for Pete's sake? Policy analyst?
Policy advisor.
Policy advisor Van Holten. And he's going to go over our budget priorities and the bills that are related to them and where they are in the process. Is that accurate, Jeff?
That is correct.
So could we pull up our budget priorities? I don't know, how come I know that Sam requested that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Belknap, and good afternoon, board members. It's good to be with all of you today. As requested, I have on the screen here your top 11 funding priorities, and I just wanted to highlight the bills that are technically connected to these priorities and just give you a quick sense of where the bills are at in the process. Just as a quick reminder, and if anyone, we have staff that has a song ready for this, but the 5 steps of a bill: committee floor, governor. So don't forget that. And I'll let you know where in the 5 steps these bills are. Anything right now that has pending new year appropriation budget bill next to it is because those items will be funded in the budget bill when it is released. The reason why I have put the word pending in all caps is we don't know whether or not these items will make it into the budget bill. We hope, fingers are crossed. And if they do, we don't necessarily know that they'll be funded at the amount that you had prioritized. So just know that most of these, you're still kind of in the waiting game for the revenue estimates to come out, which they have not yet. And I'm sure the moment they do, Sam and Deborah will be ready to release that exciting information about how much is out there for all of us to go shopping with. But priority number 3, full day kindergarten at the $22,780,500. That is House Bill 193. In the 5-step process, it has gone to committee and passed. So now it is on the House floor. Once it passes that, it'll go over to the Senate to do committee floor and then the governor for signature. The Curricular Fees Bill, House Bill 211. Again, right now, this bill is in flux because of the revenue estimates not being present just yet. This has gone to committee and passed and is on the floor as well. And I believe it is currently circled on the floor. The Center for Continuous School Improvement. This is a bill that is not out publicly yet. So the 5 steps, it's at step 0. But the bill should be coming out at some point in the very near future. We know language has been sent to the drafter, and so we anticipate seeing the bill connected to this request, making its debut any day now. And last but not least, the Flexible Educator-Directed Preparation and Collaboration Time. This is House Bill 396. This bill has been released publicly, and it has not begun its journey on the 5 steps, but it is out and available for anyone to review. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Van Holten. Board Member Lear has a question.
I'm wondering if questions about 396 would be appropriate now.
Would it be okay if we did that? It's one of our top to discuss the bill when we get there. Is that okay, Carol, if we wait there? It's one of our top ones because it was requested last week.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jenny put her hand down, so I'm assuming that was answered as well. Okay, all right. Any other questions on our funding priorities or the bills that are corresponding to them or the money that's corresponding to them? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sam, School Finance Director, as well. Okay, we are going on to, I have to turn my page. We are going on to number 4. It's action on a waiver to rule R277477. And we're going to turn our time over to Paula Plant, our School Children's Trust Director. Paula?
Thank you, Chair Belknap. This request has to do with rolling out a new website. You are probably aware that the IT team has been helping us bring the website in-house. The school community councils, principals have a responsibility to report on their prior year plan. In the new programming, the business administrators enter those expenditures through the UPEV system, and that data is not available until mid-January. So that data fills in the final reports, but it's not available until then. In the programming process, we were not able to see it until it was live. Instead of most things can happen in test. When it came across, there were numbers in the spaces. They weren't the right numbers. So the programmers had to go back and see if they could figure out where the numbers were drawing from and try to make that correction. It took about 3 weeks, and the board rule requires that the LEAs complete their review. So the principals had to submit first, then the LEAs do a review. They need to complete their review and make a report to their governing board by the 1st of March. Because they were 3 weeks late receiving the form, we're asking on their behalf a 3-week extension so they can complete their work.
Do we have any questions on this? I don't see any, so I would be seeking a motion that the board extends the deadlines in subsections R277, 477, 6, subsection 7 and 8 from March 1st to March 18th for the 2021-22 school year.
So moved.
Okay, I have two so moved. So Board Member Booth is a motion and Board Member Norton is a second. Board Member Booth, would you like to speak to your motion?
No, I think Paula has just spoken and I'm very supportive.
Thank you, Board Member Booth. Board Member Earl?
Yeah, I did have a question, so I apologize. And I don't know why my video is not working again today. It said I've got to do I don't know, probably an update or something, but I won't log out right now. My question is this, did they know what the error was and were they able to get it fixed? Did I understand that correctly?
Paula?
Before, we were not able to see this application in test. So we had to wait until it went live, and we didn't receive the live part until about 3 days before it was to be released to the schools. So we didn't become aware of the problem until it was time for schools to start doing their entry.
So we still may not know if it's corrected all the way. Is that accurate?
It should be corrected going forward. We should not have this problem again next year.
So Paula, as you're looking at, I think maybe Board Member Earl is asking, as you're looking now, the data is accurate that they will be reporting on the 18th.
Yes.
Thank you. It was Board Member Earl, is that correct?
If there's any, yes, that is accurate. I just wondered if there is still any concern with this, will it need to come before us again? And how are you getting feedback if it's still not quite reporting what it needs to report?
We're interacting with the LEAs on a regular basis. They see something or a school sees something that doesn't look accurate, they call us. If something needs to be corrected, we interact then with the developers and put in tickets so that things can be corrected. We're finding little tweaks through the process where things have to be corrected. So yeah, it's an ongoing conversation with principals. And
okay, thank you.
Thank you. I also think that Board Member Hart, Board Member Hart, Hymas, and Hutchings and Belknap would probably call you immediately as well. So, okay, Board Member Hart.
Yeah, remind me when the deadline is for next year's plan. I want to know, I'm looking to put this in order of what other deadlines we have for land trust.
May I answer?
Yeah, Board Member Hart, does this go back to the deadline question or the motion?
Yes, because
Okay.
if it if it crunches them up, then I'm not going to vote for it.
Oh, with this crunch to that crunch.
Mhm.
Okay, go ahead, Paula.
The district, the LEA set the due date for the upcoming school plan. And the upcoming school plan is due to us after LEAs have approved it on May 15th. So we're hoping that this will give LEAs the time to complete a final report. They can't start the school plan until the final report is complete. And we have some districts that are working still to meet the March 1st deadline, but there are some larger districts that are really challenged by doing that. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Hart. Any other questions? Okay, so I'll put the motion before us that the board extends the deadlines in subsection R 277-477-6, 7, and 8 from March 1st to March 18th for the 2021-2022 school year. Please vote. Molly, you raised your hand. Thank you. Your mic's on too. Okay, I see that that's unanimous, and for clarity, Sybil, Vice Chair Davis is here. And but Cindy, will you put your number in front of your name? That would help. I think Board Member Earl needs to do that too. Paula, thank you so
Yes,
much.
ma'am.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to, it's such a miracle. We are moving so well. We're a little ahead of time. I shouldn't say that out loud, should I? Okay, so we're going to go on 5.1. I don't believe we have any legislators coming today. And Jeff, do we have any, on 5.2, do we have any legislative policy requests today?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Then we will go on to 5.3 of discussion of 2022 general session legislation. So let's go ahead, Jeff.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair. And I just wanted to let staff in the room know Angie is unavailable today. She's up on the hill taking care of some things. So I will be your solo host today as we go through this list. So staff, if you're on here and you hear me take us down a rabbit hole or say something wrong, please feel free to step in and give us some good context for the bill, because I don't want to assume that I know everything. Because if you make that assumption about me, we will both be in a very bad place. So with that, I'm going to start going down the list and reviewing some legislation with you. But first, I did want to pivot and talk about a bill that has been reviewed before. There is an update, and I know that Leah Voorhees is ready to kind of give a quick update to all of you on Senate Bill 134. And so I might actually, Vice Chair, if it is okay with you, pause and hand the mic over to Leah quickly to do that review first, if that's okay with you, and then we'll dive into the list.
I think that's good, because if you think about it, the motion was to oppose this bill, but to work with the bill sponsor and see if they could do some substitutions. So that will be interesting to see today. So go ahead, Leah, are you going to take it?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair. Leah Voorhees, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support. So yes, according to that motion, Angie and Debbie Davis and I, Deputy Superintendent Stallings and Executive Director Davis and I did provide feedback to the sponsor and to the Senate sponsor and the House sponsor on this bill. And this morning, so just a couple hours ago, another substitute of this bill has come out, which really did incorporate the feedback that we had provided the sponsors on the bill. So the definition of incidental benefit that was taken, that we felt had been taken out of context, has been stricken from this third substitute, and instead the language in the CFR about all the different ways that an LEA has to consider their use of funds for special education has been added in. And the key actually is, the version I am looking at is the one that shows you what the third sub is. So I don't have no, it doesn't have the number lines, but the key is under 3B, Jeff. In 601, 3B, the key line that we requested be replaced with that definition of incidental benefit is costs of providing an LEA special education program include only costs that are in excess of funds allocated to an LEA for general education. And Deputy
Would you give us a line again? Jeff can't.
The version I'm looking at doesn't have the line, so hang on, because I'm looking at the one where it shows you what's different between the third sub and the second sub. Okay, so under local school board allocation, 3B. Hang on, I'm trying to get there too on the other version. Yeah, there you go. Keep going. It's this big red section just under that. Okay, there you go, B. Okay, so right at the top of the page, you've got the 3 and then you have the B. Thank you, Jeff. Sorry about that. Costs of providing an LEA special education program include only costs that are in excess of funds allocated to an LEA for general education. So this is language from the Code of Federal Regulations that we suggested being added, and that the focus would be on using special education funds for excess costs, not for general education costs, instead of the focus being on trying to define the word incidental or the amount of benefit that non-disabled peers could receive from special education. So it changes the look and the focus, but this is language that is right out of the federal regulations, and then the next couple bullets add that from the federal regulations that you can't commingle state and federal funds, that state funds have to be used to supplement, not to supplant funds. So these changes in this third sub do seem to address the concerns that the board had originally in the previous two versions.
Thank you, Leah. Does anyone have any questions? Board Member Lear? Carol, you're on mute.
Yeah. Can I ask a couple of questions? May I ask a couple of questions of Dr. Voorhees?
Yes.
I want to know if this satisfies your concern, Leah, about the funds that are supposed to be for students with disabilities still focused on students with disabilities. Does that satisfy your concern, or does it just make the statement different?
It significantly reduces my concerns, Board Member Lear. It isn't. It isn't as prescriptive as your rules, which is helpful to some people, and we have heard is not as helpful to others. But I think it very clearly identifies that the costs have to be for special education, not for general education. So it significantly decreases my concerns.
Well, last question, Chair. Is there anything left unaddressed in here that is still a concern to you?
No, not as far as the language specific to the benefit or lack of benefit to non-disabled peers. There is still at the very end, Jeff, if you want to go down to clear to the very bottom, there is still Senate Bill 118 and House Bill 114 are still looking at the funding formula for special education. And so it doesn't really have anything to do with Senate Bill 134, except that they all come from the same section of code. And so whatever happens with Senate Bill 118 or House Bill 114, they all need to, to meld together. And we just need to ensure, and we talked about this last week, Deputy Superintendent Jones talked about it last week, that whatever happens with Senate Bill 118 or House Bill 114, that no LEA is put in a position to not meet maintenance of effort because their state funds were reduced. So it doesn't really have to do with 134, except it's all the same section of code.
Thank you. Thank you.
And can I add one more thing, Vice Chair? So I did share, as soon as this came out this morning, I did share that the third sub had come out with the leadership of the District Special Education Director Association and the Charter Special Education Director Association, with both of those groups, and the leadership of the Utah Council of Administrators of Special Education. And they had a quick meeting, and they are more comfortable with this iteration of the bill. And they think that the bill is not particularly helpful because they don't think it really changes anything, but they are certainly more comfortable with this iteration of the bill than the previous one. So I just wanted to share that, make that explicit.
Thank you, Director Leah. Board Member Earl?
Thank you. I think that did ask me a question. I wanted to know if others had reviewed this as well, where it had just come out this morning, but it sounds like others have reviewed it and feel like it meets maybe the needs or the intent of the bill, but yet also allows it to meet the needs and intent of what we need in the state of Utah. Is that accurate?
I think if that's a question that they vetted it through others, is that the question?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to make sure others had seen it, where it had just come out this morning or had a chance to weigh in on it. And it sounded like that was the case.
That's accurate.
Okay.
Thank you. Board Member Klein?
Oh, I just had a quick question up on 3I in the red section. It just looked like there was maybe a typo there and I wasn't sure what it meant, what it was supposed to say. The prohibition on commingling state special education program. What is commingling?
Oh,
yeah.
Is it on commingling?
It's commingling. Do you want me to respond, Vice Chair?
Commingling. Oh, okay. I just read it wrong.
That makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? Are you okay now?
That's so funny. Yeah. I was like,
Okay
what
now?
on earth?
Okay. No, I appreciate that because if we have some errors, we want to see them. So thank you. Vice Chair Davis?
Yes, thank you. Director Van Holten, if you could go back down to the bottom where it talks about 113 and 118. Dr. Voorhees, I feel like I've asked you every possible question known to man on all of these amendments and this bill, but a new one came up when I was reviewing this new amended version with folks from the Disability Law Center this morning. And they had a question on numbers where it says number 6, the state board shall annually evaluate and amend as needed the standards and guidelines that establish the identifying criteria for disability classifications. Is the underlined part something that's new that's added to this rule? And what is it replacing? Is this changing anything substantive from what we've had before?
Or maybe what we're already doing. Go ahead, Leah.
Thank you. No, this isn't changing anything substantively. We review the special education rules constantly, way more than annually. We do not bring them to you, and you have not requested us to bring them to you annually for like a very formal review, but which we certainly could do, but I don't think that's what's required here because it says amend as needed. But we keep, I have right now in my email, I have a folder that says rules update. And every time any LEA brings a question forward that says, hey, I don't quite understand this, does this mean? Then I track that and we discuss that as a team of special ed directors and your staff. And when there are enough of them or when it's substantive enough, we have brought those to you to consider amendments. So that's the process we already use. I personally don't see this changing the process, but we would be happy to change the process if you wanted us to annually bring it forward and say, are there any amendments that are recommended?
Thank you. Are you, Vice Chair Davis, you're good?
I have one more question.
Oh, go ahead.
The other question was, in this, and I think a couple of other bills, the language to provide the greatest flexibility or something to the LEA is in some of these codes. I'm not sure which line this is on in 134.
So Jeff, if you go back up to the red section, under 5A, right under the red, just below the red in black, 5A and B, that's where it is, have flexibility to respond to the needs of students with disabilities. That is new language, but that actually seems like helpful. I mean, it's appropriate language. LEAs need to be able to respond. It also seems self-evident and not necessarily not necessary, but.
Okay, they had brought that question up as well because they're seeing it in a few different. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Board Member Hanson.
Thank you, Vice Chair. With your permission, just a couple of questions for Leah.
Go ahead.
First, do you see any substantive or substantial improvements that would come from this bill passing to the way that things are being done now?
No. However, I do think that the conversation, I don't think the bill brings any substantial improvements. No. I do think that the conversations as a result of the bill can help us make recommendations to you about how to improve the wording in the rules to make them more clear. So does that answer your question?
That helps. I think that I've heard that maybe not necessary, but the process has been good for us. Next question, and you touched on this. Any change if this bill passes? Any changes to our enforcement or our rules? Will anything be required there?
Yes, I think we would recommend that we go back and clarify, and like the bill did, that we focus more on excess costs than on incidental benefit. I think that discussion has actually been helpful to the field. So I would recommend that.
Okay. And then final one, we ran into issues previously with staff, with aides and other people helping both disabled and non-disabled kids at the same time. Does this provide any clarification or any help or in that situation?
I don't know that it does. In fact, I talked to one LEA this morning who may or may not know that this conversation is going on, who was asking about what a special education aide could help with. And I had that conversation with him about would you already be providing this service and the support to general education students? If yes, then that isn't a good use of funds because it's not in excess of the general education program. Or are you doing this specifically because a student or students with disabilities need it. And so it is in excess of what you're providing in your general education program. And I hope that he found that that analysis helpful. And so that's what I think we would focus on moving forward.
Okay, thank you. And I can see the benefit of that kind of in excess analysis instead of maybe the way it's been approached in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Hanson. Thank you, Director Voorhees. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other hands. Jeff, I think we can go on. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Vice Chair. All right, at the request of Board Member Moss from last week, we're going to start with House Bill 294, the Charter School Admission Amendments by Representative Pulsifer. This bill essentially provides three new criteria or three new elements into preferences that charter schools can have when enrolling a student. Those preferences essentially are if the student is a foster care student and their siblings attend that charter school already, or the children of the home that they're now in a foster home of attend that school. The second would be if the charter school has a matriculation agreement with a secondary charter school, so it's essentially a feeder school to that secondary charter school, then the secondary charter school could give preference to the feeder school students, if that makes sense. And the third one just escaped my mind as I was.
Is it the military?
It is not the military,
Okay.
no. Oh, and if the student unenrolled from the charter school because of COVID ended up going to their boundary school and would like to come back, that would give them, they could have preference for that as well. That's the bill.
Any questions? Board Member Hanson, I think your hand is still up. I'm not sure you have a question.
My apologies, I'm done for now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Earl?
Yeah, I didn't see anything in here, but it doesn't really change timelines, right? It just gives maybe priority type of a thing to individuals that meet these criteria. Is that accurate?
That is
Okay.
correct.
Just wanted to make sure as I was looking down through that I understood all the parameters. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, I don't see any other hands. I think we can go on.
Okay, thank you. There was a motion to review House Bill 211 as well. That motion has since been withdrawn. And,
Actually, it was just a request. It was just
or
a
request. Thank you. Yes, and the request has been withdrawn. And it will be a more timely conversation once revenue estimates come out. Until then, it's kind of in a holding pattern. So we'll just jump down to House Bill 273 unless there are any questions.
Jenny, do you have a question or is your hand just still
Yeah,
up?
so we got to wait for revenue in order to talk about this one. Is that what I'm understanding you're suggesting? Because it didn't the sub significantly altered some things in here. Is that accurate?
Go ahead, Jeff.
That is accurate. The substitute reduces what would be covered, so there are more fees still allowed. But a lot remains in flux with this bill depending on the revenue estimates and what comes in. So the bill is paused right now. It's circled on the floor, and the sponsor may do another substitute based on what revenue comes out and what funding may be provided toward this.
Okay, may I just clarify, make sure I'm understanding this? So if there's additional revenue available underneath this particular item, that it may affect or impact a sub allowing less fees and more of it paid by the local district. Is that accurate? Did I state that?
Correct. Yeah. The current.
So I guess I'm looking at this as we were needing to make sure there weren't excessive fees. And I feel like, I don't know, I'm trying to figure out the balance and going back and forth. So anyways, I can see why we're waiting, but I still wonder if we're meeting the requirements of what we needed to meet legally in order to do this. So thank you.
Okay, all right. Board Member Lear?
I just have a comment, and that is that I am on 211 and his House Bill in the sub. I am bothered that the sixth graders are again, that was stricken from the original bill, which I really appreciated, because if our sacrosanct document is the permanent injunction, allowing sixth graders to, or requiring sixth graders to pay fees is directly contrary to the permanent injunction. And I don't like that, and I don't support it. And again, trying to be consistent with the permanent injunction, which is supposed to be so sacred. So I'm troubled by that.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Lair. Jeff, go ahead.
Great. The next bill is House Bill 273. It's a civic education amendments by Representative Johnson. This bill feels very similar to a bill that was run in a previous session, where it creates a pilot grant program to support LEAs in implementing different types of innovations around civic education. There was a very similar bill that was run a couple of years ago. We even had a board rule that we wrote for it, and then the funding subsequently was pulled because of COVID. So this is kind of revisiting that in a new way, shape, and form. So you'll see here on lines 106 and pretty much all the way down, highlights kind of the criteria for an LEA to participate in the grant program, some of the elements that they can cover in creating innovations for civic education, and kind of some of the allowable uses. So this is supplementary and complementary to the program you already have that didn't have funding. I should say continuing funding. It did originally, the pilot a few years ago did have $250,000 one time that was given. That has been deployed and spent, and there was no new money provided because COVID kind of clawed back a bunch of, at the special session during COVID, clawed back a bunch of funding. So this is kind of an additional supplement to what is currently out there regarding civic education and funding some innovative ways to teach it.
Okay, we have some questions, and I love clawed back. I think that's so funny. Okay, go ahead, Board Member Earl.
Yeah, I do have a question about the funding associated with this, just because my understanding is there may be impacts to this and the UVU, or are those correlated together? I don't know if there's someone that could speak to that, if there's a difference between the two, or if they're trying to kind of mesh the two together. Is there anybody that has a feel for that?
I have a little bit of information, and then Robert Austin, if he's on, or if someone can bring Robert Austin into the room, he has a little more context. But my understanding is these are two distinct and separate items in terms of the funding request. They look similar. So there is a funding request being made. I forget which representative it is down in Utah County that's making the request, but to provide $1.5 million to the foundation, or the organization that was created at UVU in the name of former Governor Herbert. So it's the Gary Herbert Civics. I forget the name of it, but you may recall that there was something created down at UVU in Governor Herbert's name, in the name of civics. That is more related to professional learning and the educator prep program, versus this funding would be used to create innovations in the classroom and how it's deployed in a student-facing way. So complementary, but definitely two distinct and different things.
Okay, so you don't, I guess we're not seeing those being impacted one or the other, depending. It's not like one will be funded or the other kind of a thing. Okay.
Don't know. We don't know, actually.
Okay, that's why I was wondering if we have to give or take on any of these. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Earl.
Go ahead.
Did you have something else?
I was just going to add, there has been some conversation on the Hill. There's been some confusion when PEA, they did put in their funding list the 1.5 million for this bill. It is not the 1.5 million for the institute that is down at UVU. And there was some question about which one is the 1.5 funding, and it is this bill, if that helps. And PEA only had one $1.5 million recommendation on their list, and it was for this.
They should have asked for 1.499. That made it easier. Go ahead, Board Member Straight.
So everyone knows I was on the working group for this, and Robert Austin was also on the working group and has a much broader knowledge of the history of this than I do. I did send a flyer out to everyone today regarding this bill, and yeah, so pretty much just step things up. It's going to be more of a task force and a working group now. And yeah, we've had our input. There was a presentation by Superintendent Dixon in regards to Portrait of a Graduate, in regards to civics education. So we've been involved in this, and I am a part of that. And I hope everyone will take a look at the flyer I send out, because I don't want to take up everyone's time on this, but I support it, and I think it's an important bill.
Thank you, Board Member Straight. Anybody else? No, I don't see any other hands. Go ahead, Jeff.
Great. The next bill on the list is Senate Bill 163. This is an administrative rules amendment. You might be wondering why this bill is so high on our list when it's related to administrative rules generally. But I do want to point out that, as you may recall, there is an administrative rules committee that the legislature has. Their sole purpose is to review the administrative rules that agencies create as kind of a checks and balance process. This bill would expand to some extent the operations of the Administrative Rules Committee to be more than just reviewing administrative rules. You'll see throughout the bill, they changed their name here to the Administrative Rules Review and General Oversight Committee. And that's kind of a teaser as to what you see later down in the bill. Which takes a moment to get to, I apologize. But this bill would essentially start creating the ability for certain agencies to have other elements or other things they do be reviewed by this committee outside of administrative rules. In particular, they have named the Department of Health and Human Services as one that they would review some of their executive orders and things that come out from them. And there was confusion, okay, and it's taken out of this bill, so that's good. The substitute took out the original section that did allow this committee to review all policies, guidance documents, et cetera, of any agency. That has been removed from the substitute, but it does still allow this committee to now have some general oversight of certain types of things. And so as you can see here, they have jurisdiction over an agencies whose rule, policy, practice, or procedure is the subject of a finding. So there could be an audit that's performed, and or if a standing or interim committee has a finding of some kind related to a policy or related to anything that is produced by an agency, it could be sent to this committee for review. And that does expand what this committee has done in the past outside of administrative rules. So the substitute has changed a little. They still have the ability to review these additional items, but there is a process they have to go through first. It has to be a finding that is recommended to them, and then they can take it up. I'll pass it back to you, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Board Member Earl?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, did they meet monthly, or is this more of a quarterly meeting, or is it at an as needed type of a meeting when they meet?
They meet more on an as needed basis. They don't have a consistent schedule that they meet during the interim.
Okay, and then if I can ask another question.
Go ahead.
Regarding, traditionally, they've just focused on rules. When do they decide, or what's the mechanism deciding that a rule would be put up for question? Is it just a legislator that would request that kind of and put it on their agenda? Is that traditionally what that's been?
Yep.
So there's not really is there another type of mechanism?
No, so essentially the chairs of the Administrative Rules Committee, which I believe is Representative Brammer and Senator Anderegg, they would be made aware through any means or channel that there's an issue with an administrative rule and that the committee should consider it. And then it would be their prerogative as the co-chairs to determine if they need to create a meeting and an agenda item for whatever they're hearing about. So there is no formal process in how they are provided that. Constituents can reach out, other legislators can reach out. They do have staff that are overseeing administrative rules and review them as they are published. So anytime you put out an administrative rule, they do have staff that reads it to make sure it's in compliance with code. And if staff has questions about that, they may recommend it as well as a potential agenda item, but it's exclusively up to the co-chairs of that committee on when they meet and what they hear.
Okay, thank you. I wanted just clarification on that.
Thank you, Jenny. Board Member Lear?
Hi, I have had concerns about this bill. I still do. Jeff, I think on line 1217, if I'm reading that right, it still says, if you go up to C on 1212, the committee may examine and review an agency's policies, procedures, or practices that interfere with legislative intent. So that's still in there, right?
Correct. Thank you for pointing that out. I apologize. I misspoke. It is different from the first substitute. However, they've put some conditions here. Before, you didn't have the A or the B below. It was just that they could review an agency's policy, procedures, or practices. End of hard stop. Now they're adding some qualifiers to it below.
Thank you for that correction. And I'm still gravely concerned. We have a lot of time taken with this committee, which I respect if administrative rules are not strictly consistent with legislation, but to give this committee the opportunity to interpret legislative intent seems really an overreach to me and really very concerning, not just for our state board of education, which is a different animal than an agency, but for all of those other agencies where there should be a balance of power and not one small committee that then could determine legislative intent. So I'm really in trouble by this.
Thank you, Board Member Lear. Jeff, I don't see any other hands, but I do have one clarifying question. If I may, what are the other groups that they have included here, and have they brought any thoughts on this bill?
In terms of, so this impacts every state agency. There's a little piece that does it apply directly to the Department of Human Health Services, but otherwise it is all state agencies are impacted by this. It was in committee yesterday, substituted yesterday in committee and passed out with very little discussion. So I'm not sure if other state agencies are planning on stepping out and taking a position on this bill. I think many were waiting to see what the substitute would look like before they did. And that happened very quickly yesterday in committee. So it was its first committee though. So it still has a second committee in the House. So I haven't heard anything, but we'll keep our ear to the rail and let you all know if we do hear if other agencies plan to oppose this bill.
Thank you. And which committee was this heard in?
It was heard in the Senate Government and Operations and Political Subdivisions Committee.
Governance. Okay, thank you. Board Member Hanson?
Just comment that this seems like a dangerous direction to head. There are already checks and balances in place in the system. We've seen the operation of those checks and balances when resolutions have been passed by the House and the Senate, when we've been called to explain certain rules, procedures. So there are all of those checks and balances in place. This just seems like a very big shortcut, which would eliminate a lot of the due process that's inherent in the system. So not a good direction in my estimation.
Thank you, Board Member Hanson. Okay, Board Member Straight?
Is this the one that you refer to as the ombudsman bill?
No, that is a different bill.
Oh, it sounds somewhat the same. I guess that one failed, I believe. Okay.
For now. We'll discuss that one in a moment.
Okay.
Thank you, Board Member Straight. Okay, Jeff, I don't see any other hands except Board Member Hanson. Sorry. Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
Great. House Bill 396, as you may recall, this is a bill that's connected to.
Oh, hold on, Jeff. I do have one more hand. Oh, Carol?
Oh, and I'm so sorry to speak twice, but I forgot a very important point about the previous bill. And that is, it's a very difficult, when you say, well, other agencies oppose it, it's a very difficult bill to oppose. If you oppose it, then the very people that will have authority over these agencies will be able to review or look with greater scrutiny at every single thing that agency does. So I think it's going to be very hard to oppose. And the other thing is, I think other education groups will not see this, the concern that the state board has and other agencies might have, because it is sort of a technical problem that could have huge ramifications. So it's not something that USBA is going to spend a lot of time on. Thank you.
Yeah, Miss Carol, I was kind of talking about the other groups that this would affect as well.
Well, which are agencies, which I'm saying
Agencies,
the state, the health department, the tax commission, all of those, it's hard to oppose this.
Thank you. Okay, Jeff.
Great, thank you. House Bill 396, as you recall, this is a bill that is connected to your funding priority number 11. And this is the paid professional hours for educators. Actually, the title says it all, and it's actually a very straightforward bill. As you'll notice here on lines 36 to 41, these are the types of individuals that the funding would be used to provide those prep hours for. I did want to make sure I highlighted that for you all, because it's not strictly just a traditional educator, that there is a list of different employee types that would qualify for these prep hours. And then I did want to highlight at the end of the bill, what kind of prep hours are we talking about? So you see there on lines 101 to 105 that in preparing the budget bill to fund this, this is kind of how the legislature is looking at this bill in terms of the money that needs to be associated with it. So the appropriation would be the lesser of 10% of the total amount of one-time appropriation or the cost of providing 32 professional development hours for teachers in accordance with the section above that you saw in yellow. But remember, teachers is a broader category than what you normally might think. But with that, so again, the funding we assume may or may not come depending on what the revenue estimates are when they arrive. So you'll notice that this one kind of just came out, but it'll probably kind of linger until the funding has been solidified and the legislature's determined if this is going to make the cut.
Board Member Earl?
Yeah, can you help me understand the difference between this? And there's a couple other bills out there, right? Doesn't Tusher, if I'm saying his name correctly, have something similar? Or is that one not there anymore?
Yes, Representative Tusher. I always remember it's an Tusher with a T in front, as I learned how to say his name. He has corrected many people. Representative Tusher's bill is House Bill 339, and that one would provide 10 additional teacher prep days, or I think it's days or hours, depending on the tenure of the teacher. So if they're within their first 5 years, it would be 10. If they're within their first year of teaching a new subject, it would be 10, and all other teachers, it would be 5. That bill is still out. The big problem with that bill is it cost $84 million. So I do think this bill will have a much smaller fiscal note in comparison to 84 million. So this one is probably the more likely to succeed if I am down in Vegas.
Okay. I was just wondering if they were competing bills or if they were intended to be separate.
They are kind of both. They don't provide the same amount of time, and they don't necessarily provide the funding for the same type of employee. So they approach it differently and what they offer. So I think it'll be an either or versus a yes and.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Lear?
I'm looking, this is the one I had a question on earlier. I'm looking at the line starting on about line 46 or 7, what the LEA can use these hours, or what the educators within LEAs can use these for. And my question was earlier, I wonder if, and trying to be consistent with what the board passed as its 11th priority in terms of providing these same kind of days to educators, we were aiming for the greatest flexibility possible. And I'm concerned that some of these ands within this section should be ors. Maybe not all of them, but I feel like some of them should, so that an educator's use of these days would not have to meet all of the ABCs and little i's. And that's maybe something that if the board agrees that the powers that be, Jeff, could work with the sponsor on.
I think that would be amenable to the sponsor.
Thank you, Board Member Lear. Vice Chair Davis?
Never mind. Thank you. Can't we just give these teachers a couple of days to do what they need to do? But I mean, you know, I'm supportive.
Thank you. Board Member Strang?
I was down at the Capitol today and I had this brought up to me, excuse me, that they understood our intent as a board and they weren't quite certain that this language was completely in favor of that. We want self-directed teacher days. And so anyway, I heard the same concern as the previous two board members stated.
Thank you. Jeff, I don't see any more clarifying questions. We still have time. Go ahead.
Great. House Bill 419, this was a board approved request. This is the one that changes the audit code so that you, the state board versus the audit committee, can handle the employment related matters of the executive director of audit rather than just the audit committee. And that's it.
Don't see any questions. Go ahead.
Okay. House Bill 417 is another board request. You'll recall this is kind of a copy and paste of House Bill 382 from last year, where Representative Birkeland created a bill for the board at the board's request, did so again at the board's request. The main part of this bill is setting aside funding for those smaller LEAs so that they can have access to the SOEP for their students. If they have fewer than 1,000 students enrolled, but this was also a policy request that was approved by the board earlier this last year.
Board Member Lear?
I'm still a huge fan of this, but I don't see that it's going anywhere. Jeff, do you know if LEAs don't care about this anymore? Do the smaller districts not care about this? Are they willing to use WPU money that might be increased now? Can you tell me if I should keep being a fan or not worry about it?
As far as we understand and know that it's still wanted and desired, I think one of the things to note is this bill just came out yesterday. So the conversation around it may not have happened yet because it hasn't been public. It was kind of lower down in the drafting queue. As you'll notice by the kind of the high bill number, you get into the 400s, your bill is coming out pretty late in the session. So it just came out, and I think that's something to note for us, though, is to listen and see if the excitement around this bill has kind of died off, and if so, why. But I just don't think we haven't heard anything at all because it just came out.
Thank you.
Okay. Cruising right along, House Bill 337. So Board Member Straight, I honored my promise. We're getting to this one. House Bill 337 is the Office of the Education Ombudsman. I feel like I have had a decent amount of education in my life. I had no idea what the word ombudsman means. I had to look it up this year myself because I've heard it many times and I've just ignored it. Ombudsman is defined as a person who receives complaints. So that pretty much gives you a really strong sense about what this bill does. It creates a 4-person office within the governor's office itself. That's where it would be housed, and they would be the Office of Education Ombudsman. So they would receive complaints on education. The employment of the director of the office would be hired by members of the Senate, the House, and the governor on a hiring committee that's created and kind of outlined in the bill. And just to give you a sense of where this bill is at, it was in committee and it died on a very narrow vote. I believe it was 3 yeas, 4 nays, and 4 being absent. We do have it on very good authority that Representative Lisenby is working behind the scenes with a member on the prevailing nay side to bring this bill back in committee and resurrect it. So I would definitely say the death of this bill did not really end the bill. It is back at some point in the near future, potentially. If you look at the voting of the yeas and the nays, I will candidly state that there was one nay that kind of stood out as odd, and now it makes a little more sense that it might have been a procedural move.
Thank you. Board Member Earl?
Yeah, when you say, or at least the way it's currently set up, it's in the governor's office. Is that in the education area that it would be, or is it just its own separate entity? Oh, okay. That's what I wanted a clarification on.
Just its own separate.
So
Yep.
this,
Sorry.
we anticipate this will be, any subs with this will be out soon, I'm guessing.
I think step one will be for the sponsor to either resurrect the current version, or the legislature follows Mason's rules of procedures, not Robert. And they are allowed to bring something back if there's a substantial change. So she could create a new substitute, which then the motion would be very much in order to reconsider and bring the bill back as well.
Okay,
So
I see.
she can go in either direction, get a member of the no side voting side to bring it back, or just bring a sub.
Thank
We
you.
don't know which she's going to do yet.
Jeff, this is an odd question, but can you show us how they voted in committee? Will you pull that up?
Sure. You can see the votes right here. So these are the votes to approve the bill. So the yeas wanted to pass it out, the nays did not.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I don't see any other hands. Jeff, go ahead.
Great. The next bill is First Substitute Senate Bill 62. And this is where I get to do the phone a friend, because I feel that Dr. Voorhees would give this far more justice than I ever could. So if it pleases the vice chair, I would like to pass the torch over to Dr. Voorhees.
That would be great. Thank you. Dr. Voorhees?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Jeff. Leah Voorhees, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support. So if you all remember, last year, the legislature passed the Special Needs Opportunity Scholarship Program, which created a scholarship granting organization, an STO, that would provide tax deductions for individuals who donated to this scholarship that would be for students eligible for an IEP. We at the State Board of Education put out an RFP to get an SGO, which we did, and have been working with the SGO to refine the process. What this bill does is several important things. The first thing is it changes the eligibility criteria for a student to be considered a student who has a disability, and uses most of the IDEA criteria, but removes the need for a properly constituted IEP team and changes it to a multidisciplinary team, which could be one or more individuals with multidisciplinary knowledge. It does provide LEAs the protection that just because a student is determined eligible by the SGO's multidisciplinary team, that does not mean that the LEA then has to accept that student as a student that is eligible for special education. So the LEA would still get to do their own evaluation to determine eligibility, which was one of the LEA's concerns. So that concern was addressed. It also does a couple other things, though. It removes a lot of, in Zach Christensen, purchasing director's terms, a lot of the board's ability to use standard terms and conditions in the process to contract with the SGO. And it removes the board's ability to require, to be honest, have much oversight over the SGO, to require a lot of the documentation that we had previously been requesting of the SGO. And then the fourth thing that it does is it adds the ability for siblings of students who have been determined eligible to be considered students with disability. It adds the ability for their siblings to then also get scholarships through the SGO to attend private schools. So if one student in the family is determined by an LEA or by the SGO's multidisciplinary team to be eligible, then all or any or all of the students in that family could then also receive scholarships through the SGO. So those are the four major differences from our current practice to what this bill would allow and or require.
Any other questions? Leah, I have a question on this. So a student who is found eligible and is a student with who's been designated with an IEP, correct? And so now their siblings can also use this scholarship money that was set aside for students with IEPs.
Correct. But remember, in this is different than Carson Smith. So this isn't state money that's paying for the scholarship, it's donations. So, you know, it might be neighbors, grandpa, random business people that are donating the money for the scholarships. But yes, you are correct. Then siblings could then access scholarships as well. If one student in the family is determined eligible, then any and all of the students in the family can access scholarships.
Okay, and I'm sorry to keep asking questions. Are the money that someone donates to this fund, I know that it's a tax deduction, but can they do some, give it, and anyone can use it? And are they going to be made aware it might be not be used for kids with IEPs?
I don't actually think the bill specifically says that the SGO has to alert donors to that. Jeff, do you remember seeing that in the bill? Yeah, I don't think it's there.
So someone could donate money and they think it's going to students with who have IEPs, and yet it could go to their siblings and be used up, but didn't go to separate. I'm just asking. Okay,
I think that's true, Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Lear.
So now, thank you for the reminder about the difference from Carson Smith, Leah. But are there any other ways, aside from being sort of quasi under the direction of the state board, any other ways that there are public education dollars that are supporting this program now that are supporting this program, now that they've done away with the requirement that school districts designate the disability, and they're using these multidisciplinary teams?
So an LEA still could make the determination if the parents wanted to go that direction. So it could be an LEA or a multidisciplinary team. But no, I don't. And Jeff, you can correct me from your understanding, but no, there wouldn't be other ways that public education dollars would be funneled to this process. But do remember that LEAs are already required to evaluate students, even in private schools and that are homeschooled, for eligibility for special education. So that's not actually new. That would not be a new requirement for LEAs. This actually lessens the burden on LEAs, to be honest.
Right. But I'm just, sorry, if I can just continue for 20 seconds. I'm just looking for any ways any way that this disadvantages the public ed system. And I can't see them anymore, unlike if this were added to the Carson Smith program. And that's what I'm looking for a positive response to, if that's true, Leah.
I don't think that it is disadvantaging the system. I think it is, this particular bill is removing some of the safeguards that were previously in place, but I don't think it's a disadvantage, no.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Board Member Lear. Jeff, do you want to continue, please?
Next up is House Bill 356, Athletic Coaching Standards Amendments. This is Representative Tusher's bill. This bill essentially, the only element that really relates to the board here is this bill would require that the board create coaching standards in a general sense, and then an evaluation form of coaches to those standards. Much like you have with teacher evaluations and teachers being held to a certain standard, the impetus for this bill is you have many at-will coaches who are removed from employment, and complaints have been made that they did not know why they were fired, or they didn't have anything they could show that they were pushed out by parental complaints, but their evaluations show they're a good coach, they're good at teaching athletic skills, etc. So they would like to have this evaluation as something that they can kind of use in a sense of like a resume almost, and say, look, I've been evaluated over the last 2 years. I did have some parents complain I was let go, but I can show I was a good coach with this evaluation. So it does require that LEAs would provide the evaluations and keep record of those evaluations on hand in their employment record. Again, the board's only role in this would be to create the overarching standard for the coach and the evaluation form. And this would only apply to head coaches. This would not apply to subsequent coaches. That would be viewed as the head coach's job to evaluate those who fall underneath them. But that's the bill.
Thank you, Board Member Earl.
And maybe those of you working in the schools can articulate this, but I'm just wondering what this really looks like, time commitment wise. Do you know what I mean? And in fairness, is this one model that everyone's going to use? Is each LEA coming up with it? What does that look like? And if it's not uniform, you've got people that are going to be, do you know what I mean? There just will be an inconsistency or probably even a problem associated with it.
I think the hope of the sponsor is that the board setting the standards in the evaluation form will appease some of those concerns. But those have been concerns that have been voiced directly by many members of USSA, USBA. I believe JLC took a position of oppose on this bill, or I think they're actively having that conversation if they have not. They have a lot of concerns regarding this bill, and some of those being those you articulated.
Jeff, I have a question. Do you know if they've worked with the UHSAA? They do have a register my coach, and how that works. And then also, is there anywhere in here a provision for those who are volunteers and aren't paid?
So if the head coach is volunteered and not paid, there is nothing in this bill that I have read that would prevent them from needing to be evaluated and having the evaluation. I guess they could try and opt out of that, because that is also not necessarily prohibited from this. The LEA needs to offer it though. In terms of register my coach, there were several conversations with the sponsor of the bill regarding whether or not that tool would be sufficient. And the constituents behind this bill did not feel that that would be enough in relation to the problem that they felt like they were trying to solve. So although it is there and helpful, this would be in addition to that tool.
And where is it now in the process?
This bill has been assigned to the House Political Subdivisions Committee, but it has not been agendized yet.
Thank you. Okay, Jeff, go ahead.
Okay. Next on the list is Senate Bill 192. This is the CPR in schools bill. You may recall we already have, essentially, we already do this. There is a grant program that the board runs. I believe it's about $200,000. There's an application for it to provide funding to LEAs to adhere to the standard in our health standards. It is a standard in our health education standards to teach CPR to the students. This essentially codifies what the board is already doing. It doesn't really add anything new at all. It does increase the funding from 200 to 270,000. And it does require that students may receive this between grades 9 and 12. That is essentially the bill. It really just kind of codifies what we have already been doing with some additional parameters, but nothing too different or new.
Thank you, Jeff. Go ahead.
Next up is House Bill 390. I don't know if Nathan Ock is still with us. I know he has worked with the sponsor and has received requests to answer some questions and whatnot. He might be best posed to answer or highlight this bill, as it recently just came out about a couple days ago. I have not had a really good chance myself to review it, but if it pleases the chair, I could pass the torch to Nathan Ock.
Go ahead, Nathan.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Chair. Nathan Ock, STEM Coordinator and Early College Specialist for the Utah State Board of Education. So this bill makes a couple of amendments to both concurrent enrollment and early college kind of broadly. The code, one of which you'll notice a bunch of changes at the top that's just providing some coherence surrounded how advanced placement is laid out, whether it's capitals or lowercase. But the substantive changes do a couple of things. The first of which is to bias funding for both AP programs as well as concurrent enrollment programs towards relieving the pressure of fees that students experience within participating in those programs. It does it a little bit different for each of them. For AP, it's covering test fees that students taking AP courses experience. And then in concurrent enrollment, because our fee rule already covers textbooks, this bill would in addition cover the tuition for participating within concurrent enrollment classes, which is currently $5 per credit, roughly. For most classes, that's $15 to participate in each concurrent enrollment class, along with the application fee that the student is almost always required to pay before participating. There is a couple of institutions of higher education that have waived those fees, but in general, students pay between $35 and $50 to apply to the institution of higher education before they can take concurrent enrollment courses. So it changes the way that the funding formula would work to ensure that the allocations that are already in place would go towards those things before being doled out in the way that the board has identified within board rule. And then secondly, it also allows LEAs, and this is a may, not a shall, but it allows LEAs to use an indirect rate related or an unrestricted rate related to indirect costs, which means that more money from the allocation goes towards the program as opposed to covering those indirect rates. And that would be at the discretion of the LEA. I'm happy to be more specific in either of those circumstances if anyone has any questions or comments or concerns.
Thank you. Board Member Earl.
Yeah, and if you said this, I missed it, but when you talk indirect cost, would that be like someone taking a class from the DATC where it would be an additional fee for something like a culinary arts class? Is that, or is it something different for the concurrent enrollment?
Yeah, so I can be general. My specialty isn't in this space. Maybe someone from finance could help, but basically indirect costs refers to things like running the building during times that like it wouldn't otherwise be running, having to provide like supervision or custodial services if those programs run during times that those rooms or a building wouldn't already be used. And so the business administrators for a number of programs can take some of the allocation related to the program funds to cover costs that running those programs create.
My apologies, I didn't notice the indirect. I was just thinking other costs associated with it beyond the actual fee. So I apologize for that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Nathan, thank you for introducing that. Jeff, we are going to go to the next part of our board meeting, if that works here. So let's go to potential action on legislation. Board Member Earl.
Yeah, I have a couple, one I do have a question on, but House Bill 273, let me go back so I can get the actual title of it, which would be the Civics Education Amendments. Should I do these one at a time or?
Just do one and then we'll come
Okay.
back. Go ahead, Jenny.
Oh, yeah, I would like to make a motion that we pass this out with a favorable, or not out, that we support this House Bill 273, which is the Civics Education Amendment.
Do I have a second?
Second, Hart.
Second, Board Member Hart. Board Member Earl, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I'll speak to the motion. I think it's got some good components to it. I think there's some thoughtfulness that's gone behind it. I think we can, this is something that we can work with and that will meet the needs of local districts. I'm hoping that they'll be innovative and thoughtful in meeting the requirements that are listed here. So those are my thoughts there.
Thank you. I saw Vice Chair Davis's hand up before that and Board Member Moss. I'm thinking they're not speaking to this. Board Member Straight.
I just barely sent an update on the flyer I sent earlier.
Okay. Thank you, Board Member Straight. Okay, so the motion before the board is that the board support HB 273 Civic Education Amendments. I see no hands being raised on this at this time. Let's go ahead and vote. You can take your hands down. I have written them down.
I'll abstain. This is Natalie.
Thank you. Okay, it looks like everyone else voted yes, who's in attendance, and Board Member Klein abstained. Okay, Board Member Davis.
Thank you. I move that that the board remove the opposed position to SB 134 sub 3.
Do I have a second?
Second, Hart.
Second by Board Member Hart. Vice Chair Davis, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I would. Some of you may remember last time that as part of our opposition, we did ask staff to work with the bill sponsors to seek some amendments that really align, you know, as the sponsor was saying, well, this aligns with federal guidelines and understandings. And so we asked for some amendments to flesh that out and add some clarity there. And in good faith, I think that he did do that. And so I think that we should remove our opposition. I understand that there may be other groups that still, you know, feel one way or another, but since we asked for this and this was done, I think that we need to remove the opposed. I do want to address a couple of things that came up in the conversation. And I really feel like as we are working on, you know, future code and or board rule, we really need to get away from extreme and polarizing understandings or discussions on this issue. And I want to give you two examples that have come up in our conversations with sponsors and others. One is that someone said, well, I heard from a teacher that he or she can't say a word to general ed students if she's an aide that's paid for out of general ed funds. This is not true. And our aides that are paraeducators that are paid for with special ed dollars, their predominant benefit is going to go to the special education students, but certainly they can and should interact with other students in the classroom. And the second, on kind of the opposite side of this, is another person said, if the IEP team says the general ed placement is the right place for a student with disabilities, then that is the specialized instruction. This also is not true. And if we have given any indication in our rules that either of those scenarios are okay or advocated for or within what the law is communicating or our rules are communicating, then we have some work to do to communicate more clearly. And, you know, as we work through laws and as we come up in this next year, we, of course, will be working through our rules as we look at different changes to law, and we can make sure to add clarity, as Dr. Voorhees mentioned earlier before, talk about excess of funds and really get away from these polarized interpretations and understandings and get to what's really going to be healthy, where we understand and promote and are grateful for inclusive opportunities. And at the same time, we understand that students with disabilities can and should be allowed specialized instruction by highly trained individuals. And so I'm going to end there. I could talk for a long time. The other thing I want to say is that we all care about students with disabilities. Everybody who's taking part in this conversation right now cares about students with disabilities, and in any way, shape, or form to indicate that one or the other doesn't also isn't true. What is true is I need to stop talking and we need to move on. Thanks.
Board Member Earl?
Yeah, I was just gonna maybe mention a little bit of something that Cindy mentioned as well, but this just that I think this is working together with a number of groups and trying to come to a closer understanding of what the difference in opinions where I think that's important that we also move this forward as we asked to be part of that dialogue, and we were part of that dialogue. And so I'm appreciative to our staff and others that have engaged in this in a way that we can, maybe not a complete consensus yet, but we are getting closer. So I appreciate that thoughtfulness.
Thank you. I don't say too much, but this has really been worked on hard, and I appreciate the opportunity to work with legislators and maybe to make betterments like we've talked about today. So Board Member Straight.
Yeah, I was listening to an education topic last night, and towards the end of that, the person said, well, I just don't trust the local school board to do this, and this. And I thought about that, and maybe sometimes I get caught up in that too. And maybe others do as well. Maybe the legislature does sometimes. And yeah, we have a lack of trust that I think is sometimes harmful. That's all.
Thank you. Okay, so the motion before the board is the board remove the opposed position on SB 134 special education amendments. Please vote. I think that voting is unanimous. Vice Chair Davis? Yes, that voting is unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Okay, Board Member Moss?
Thank you, Vice Chair. I have a request and a motion. Could I request that we tee up SB 191 for review next time? I assume if I moved it, you would caution me that that goes against protocol. So if I could request that one.
Because we haven't reviewed it. And we can, I think he's going to make a motion, Jeff, or who's ever writing. We'll put that down, okay?
I do have a separate motion. I'd like to move.
I knew that.
Okay, I would like to move that we support House Bill 294, Charter School Admission Amendments. Sponsors Karen Pulsiver.
Second, Hart.
have any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, the motion before the board is the board support HB 294 charter school amendments. Please vote. That passes with one no vote by Board Member Klein. I think that's correct. Okay, Board Member Earl, you said you had another motion.
Yeah, I move that the board support House Bill 396, the paid professional hours for educators.
Second and third and fourth.
I don't know what that was. So I'm just waiting to see the motion before the board. The motion is that the board support HB 396 paid professional hours for educators. Jim, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, it was Jenny, right?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jenny.
I'll
Sorry,
second
Jenny.
it though.
No, you don't. Oh, you got second? Okay, thank you. I think Board Member Hart seconded. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Board Member Earl, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I do think this is a reasonable approach, and we've asked a lot of our educators. I feel like this is just a reasonable approach to provide some additional time for them to meet the needs that they have, as well as some of those that they're being asked to do. So that's my thoughts about that.
Thank you. Board Member Lear.
Would it be a friendly amendment to say, to ask in supporting this, because I absolutely do. You'll recall we made the original motion and everybody else jumped on our own. They're just bad bandwagoners, as my grandkids say. But I would like to work with the sponsor to make sure that those ands are not limiting, that maybe some of them could become ors. I'm a little uncomfortable with just relying on legislative intent.
Carol, wait just a minute. So are you making an amendment?
Yes.
And you're
I'm making I hope it's a friendly amendment.
No, I think you're adding to it. So we need to make an amendment.
And work with the sponsor to ensure that the ands in lines, I forget the exact 37 plus ish. I can't remember the exact position of those, of that section right there, starting line 47 through
yeah, that it was all the okay, so Carol, I'm just trying to keep you narrowed and then you can speak to it. So to work with the sponsor to ensure that the ands in line 47 through 46 are removed or
provide adequate flexibility.
Okay, so I'm just going to question you just so I get full clarity as to what you're wanting to amend here, that you want to add to this, that the sponsor is going to decide whether it is adequate flexibility.
I think the insurer is broader than the sponsor, but I didn't want to go on to 5 lines to say where the or should be instead of ands. So that's my point. I think the staff, if the board supports this, the staff gets my point, I think.
Okay, so really then what we're doing is asking staff to work with the sponsor to ensure that the ands in line 47 through 66 provide adequate flexibility and may be changed to ors.
Or change, put need, instead of need, put change, or change to ors, which is still a little weird, but okay.
Okay, so what your amendment is adding is because the original was to support HB 396 paid professional hours for educators, and you want to add and have staff work with the sponsor to ensure that the ands in line 47 through 66 provide adequate flexibility or change to ors.
Right.
Is that correct?
That is not grammatically so, but it is.
The concept?
Yes.
Cindy, do you want to, are you correcting us here?
Are changed, if you're going to keep working on it, or are changed to ors.
Are you calling on me?
Well, there's a lot of people who want to speak to this, but are you helping us to write this?
I just have a clarifying question. Does the amendment seek to have the section of lines 47 through 66 provide adequate flexibility or change the ands to ors?
It just is
is she saying that there can be something written there, that there's some flexibility for teacher directed choices, or if that doesn't happen, then we're asking to have the ands changed to ors?
Can I respond?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Trying to be respectful of the offer from the legislators and the sponsors, but I'm also saying we really wanted maximum flexibility for educators. So,
okay,
so we're doing two. There's two things then, right, Cindy?
Yes, then we just, that section that's highlighted there, it just the part about the ands needs to be moved after the flexibility.
Yep.
So it would say, I move that the board support HB 396 paid professional hours for educators and have staff work with the sponsor to ensure lines 47 through 66 provide adequate flexibility, or that the ands are changed to ors. Does that fit with your intent?
My intent, yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks for giving us that clarifying language. Okay, that is the motion. That is the amendment. I would be seeking a second.
Second, Booth.
Second by Board Member Booth. Do we have any discussion to this amendment, which is, and have staff work with the sponsor to ensure lines 47 through 66 provide adequate flexibility, or that the ands are changed to ors? Board Member Hanson, are you speaking to this? Okay.
Can I speak to my motion?
Yeah, I'm just, yes, of course you can, because I told you not to. Okay.
I've already somewhat, but I just want to stick with the intent that the board had in coming up with this idea, and make sure there is maximum flexibility, that if you string all those ends together as written, it would be a hard sell for every single activity that an educator proposed to be consistent with every single thing in that laundry list of desires. So I just want to give as much flexibility, and I don't want to be an ingrate toward the sponsors at all, but I also really want this not to be handcuffs, but rather to be an opportunity for educators.
Thank you. That will help clarify to our staff. Jenny, are you speaking to this amendment?
Yes, can we ensure something? I think can't we request that our staff work with it, but I don't know if we can ensure that it happens. Does that make sense? I just wonder if ensure is the right word there, if it just needs to be.
I don't care. I'm looking for the staff to understand what I'm saying. I think ensure is as good as anything, but okay.
So I would take that as a friendly amendment to take out the word ensure and to say, what was the word, Jenny? Sorry.
Well, I just think I'm all for the flexibility and making sure that we, it's not everything has to be done on that list, but that, we're picking those.
Okay, maker of the motion, you're okay with request? You're okay with request? Yes. And Board Member Booth, are you okay with that as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Moss, are you speaking to this?
Briefly, my understanding is the sponsor is open to this discussion, and I think it's important that speaking of or versus and, we have or in our own motion, which means that a discussion that ensures flexibility would leave a couple of different ways to make that happen. But my understanding is that discussion would be profitable. And I think Angie would probably be involved as well.
I believe that's so, and or Jeff. So, okay, so the amendment is before the board is and have staff work with the sponsor to request lines 47 through 66 provide adequate flexibility, or that the ands are changed to ors. Seeing no more discussion, please vote. I see that as unanimous, Vice Chair.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion before the board is that the board support HB 396, paid professional hours for educators, and have staff work with the sponsor to request lines 47 through 66 provide adequate flexibility, or that the ands and are changed to ors as amended. So that's the motion before the board. And Scott, you don't have discussion to this, right?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay. Scott, go ahead.
And I just maybe need some help in understanding. I think there was some discussion previously about the funding for this. And I wondered if we could get staff back to help me understand the source of the funding and whether support of this creates any kind of a conflict with our budget priorities that we've laid out in the past, just so we're aware of what we're doing.
So I don't know if Sam wants to take that, or Dale, or Jeff, because this does match up with our 11th priority.
I can make an attempt, and Sam or Deborah, if you want to correct me.
Okay.
My understanding is we are waiting for the revenue estimates to come in, and once those are in, the legislative leadership will prioritize which bills get funded and at what level. And so we're kind of at the holding pattern for that to take place. So it will come from the revenue once we know what the amount is. I believe the fiscal note on this bill, and this is where Sam and Deborah and Dale, you can remind me what the fiscal note currently is and what the hope is in terms of the amount of what the amount is for this bill, but the funding will come from the revenue once it's made available.
Okay, do we have we don't have an idea what the fiscal note would be for this? And then the source of funds just from the general fund, or is this education funds?
Jeff, I think you can do that. Angie, do you want to take that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Good afternoon, board members and everyone. So two things that are in this bill. Number one, if you look down at lines 101 through 105, it states that the funding for this program will come out of the stabilization account and would be the lesser of either 10% of what is included. And so, for example, in this year, I guess there's about $250 million of one-time funds in the stabilization account. So that could be $25 million, or the cost of providing 32 professional development hours or professional learning hours, I think is how it's going to be amended. The cost for those 32 hours, I believe, is about $64 million one time. It's about $16 million per 8-hour increment, if that makes sense. So it could be, though, it's saying, this language is saying that the executive appropriations shall appropriate that 10% or the equivalent of the 32 professional hours, but the executive appropriations could always do more.
Scott, do you have a?
Okay. No, but the source is the stabilization fund then. I'm sorry, I read this and that wasn't clear to me. Okay. Correct. Thank you. I appreciate it. So it doesn't create a conflict with anything that we're doing otherwise with our budget.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Hanson, for that clarity on that as well. Do we have any other questions on this? Seeing none, the motion before the board is that the board support HB 396, paid professional hours for educators, and have staff work with the sponsor to request lines 47 through 66, provide adequate flexibility, or that the ands are changed to ors. Please vote. I see that as unanimous. Vice Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. That's so great. Okay, we don't have much more time. Board Member Straight?
All right. So I hope this works out well. I'm going to put it out there. I pulled it last time, but I'm going to put it out there again today. I move the board support Senate Bill 127.
Okay, I'll need a second.
Second, Booth.
Second by Board Member Booth. Board Member Straight, I know this kind of flies in the face of you speaking, but could we have just a quick review of what this is? Because we reviewed it quite a while ago, correct? Or we haven't reviewed it?
It's been reviewed. And they did.
Why don't you speak to it, and then maybe that'll answer the questions.
Well, I did send out a message today during the House Committee, Education Committee, and it passed out of there unanimously. It's already been through the Senate. It's now headed to the full House. This is early literacy, grade K through 3, and I know everyone's aware of it, so I don't want to overburden, but I think we need to support this. We're the only ones that haven't come out in support of it. I think there were concerns and there have been concerns, and I think those were addressed today. And yeah, I'd like to move forward with it. I could speak forever on it, but I think I'll pass it that and let others speak.
Thank you, Board Member Straight. Board Member Earl?
Yes, I just want to speak to the components of this and which parts I support and which parts I don't support. I very much support the early literacy, the providing our educators, especially our K through 3rd grade educators, with the science of reading information, the training, the coaching, the things that they need to be successful in this area. I completely agree with the premise behind this. I also agree with a panel of experts, especially since this was amended and changed through a substitute to clarify what their role is. I agree with the making sure that educators that come out of programs in the state are adequately trained on this process. I do not agree with the massive expansion and the mini bureaucracy that this will be creating at the state level with the 35 coaches. I understand the premise behind it. I understand that we're mimicking other states that have had this program. I think it's better to empower our local districts to do this and to take full ownership of this. And also with the professional development with the 10 coordinators in the different areas. So I will not be voting in support of this, but I very much support the premise behind this. I'm a little concerned that as we move this direction, what's going to happen is we're going to do this with math. We're going to do this with science. We're going to do this in other areas where the state board is going to become the mover of things instead of local districts. And so I just want to explain my vote because it is in opposition to early literacy or the excellent work that Senator Milner's done. It's just the makeup of this does not quite meet where I think we need to be.
Thank you, Board Member Earl. Board Member Moss?
Thank you. I second those concerns and I will vote for this, but I share the concern that we expand the bureaucracy and the mandates. And there was a good nuanced discussion this morning on the pros and cons of local control and assistance from the state. I guess I would just like to say that I hope as we're involved in rulemaking or implementation, that we really take a close look at the needs of districts to have some flexibility. My own district, Wasatch, has done some great things in this area. They've been brought up, and so I'm familiar with some of the real advantages that come from this. But I also hear from districts the need to make it work for them, given their local timing, staffing, position with respect to existing proficiency. So I'm in favor, but I hope we keep that in mind as we move forward.
Thank you. Just as a reminder, we have 5 minutes. Board Member Norton.
I would agree wholeheartedly with the comments from Board Member Earl. I'm also concerned that of the timing with this. You know, last year, the most important thing that we could do was numeracy, and we've got to do this numeracy. And, you know, the world revolves around numeracy, and this year it's, you know, literacy. And I think that there's a lot of schools that are already using this. I'd like to see the data from the Utah schools that have been involved with this massive amount of money that USBE put into it earlier this year to get this started before we, you know, roll out another big freight train of money to put into this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Norton. Board Member Booth. Oh, your hand is down now. Okay, Vice Chair Davis.
I just want to say I support the intent. I'm not quite there with some of the details, but I certainly understand the intent and where we're trying to go, and I'm supportive of the intent. I'm just not quite there on the details.
Thank you. Board Member Lear.
I am where Board Member Davis is and Board Member Earl, and have concerns about another level of bureaucracy and another program to manage. I'm also, but I am also persuaded by Brent's wholehearted support, and he's a teacher. He knows how important reading is, and that makes me conflicted now that I hear Kristen's concerns. I'm also not really a fan of the panel of experts. I think it's a little insulting, and not trying not to be emotional about this. And so I may follow the grand tradition of Member Moss and abstain, but I'm deciding.
Thank you, Board Member Lear. Board Member Hart.
I echo what's been said by Member Davis, Member Earl. I feel like this is steps 3 through 8 all at once. I would have been extremely comfortable with letters training for the rest of the teachers. That program is outstanding. We're hearing some really good things, but we also know that it comes at a great time cost. And I just think we have to work with our districts and support them as their teachers go through this process to maximize what letters can offer. This adds bureaucracy, like has been said, and I truly believe that no change sticks unless it emanates from where the change is actually being implemented and taking place. And so I very much support supporting coaches, but I don't support USBE sending coaches in to districts. So while I support it wholeheartedly, I think it's a beautiful program, letters, and I think our teachers need that knowledge as well as teachers coming in. I just can't support all the other additional items in this bill at this time.
Thank you, Board Member Hart. Board Member Booth.
I'm back. Sorry. So, you know, I totally resonate with everything that's being said here by some thoughtful board members. I am totally and completely in support of early literacy improvements. And I think that the program could be awesome, but I also am concerned about local flexibility and local input. Is there a way that with a friendly amendment, we could say we support all of this, but we caution as the bill is finalized that we can't lose track of the fact that the same size doesn't fit everybody, and local control is something we always stand for as a state school board.
Thank you, Board Member Booth. Dr. Dixon?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So, you know, I've listened to conversations on a Hill. I've listened to testimony in Senate and House. And one of the things that I keep noticing, or hearing, I should say, is a disconnect between what we're doing with letters training and what we know about best practice in a more comprehensive way. And, you know, the mantra that comes to mind for me is training without follow-up is malpractice. So as I learn more and more about this, you know, to me, it's building capacity in LEAs to do the very things that you board members are cautioning about and understanding around local control and local needs. But I feel like a bit of malpractice where the board has so wisely invested in letters training. Dr. Nye stopped me today, and I don't mind sharing this publicly. I'm sure he wouldn't mind. The K-3 teachers who are engaged in letters, the 4th through 6th grade teachers came along and said, we want in on this. This is making such a difference for lower grades. We want to learn this as well. So it's, you know, letters is building momentum, but then what? If we don't build capacity in the coaches that are out there with their knowledge and ability. So I don't see this, and Jennifer, Dr. Throts can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see us putting coaches out there in perpetuity. I see this as building capacity in LEAs, and I think that's the disconnect I keep hearing. It's a yes, and yes, the board has so wisely invested in letters training, and they're in order to comprehensively support the efforts that are out in districts, we're working to build capacity, and then our job is to step back from that and just support them where they need it. But I just wanted to add that because I do keep hearing this disconnect that it's another thing or another layer or more work for teachers, when in fact, this whole system is really built to support teachers and our LEAs as they increase their capacity around literacy. And that's something that we haven't had in the past. Thanks for indulging me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We are at 2:02 and I have made a grave error. We do not have a second on this motion.
Yeah, we do.
I second.
Who seconded it?
Randy.
Who did? Randy did. I'm so sorry, Board Member Booth. Thank you. Okay. So just so everyone knows, we are at 2:02. We are past time. So, and we have meetings to get to. Vice Chair Davis.
Just a quick question. Board Member Straight had mentioned that some of the concerns have been resolved, and I apologize. I should have gone back and read this whole thing. Has it changed for higher ed to where the literacy assessment can just kind of stand on its own to see what changes need to be made in the future, or are there still the provisions in that you know, the panel is going to be involved in the hiring of a literacy person, and then they're going to monitor the literacy scores, and if the scores aren't good, they're going to pull the, you know, opportunity to prepare teachers and such. Has any of that been amended, or is that all still in place? Could someone let me know?
I'm thinking Jennifer Thronson can answer that. Yes, Jennifer?
Yes, thank you, Chair. That part has not changed. The deans of education are supportive. We've had a 4-year rollout plan that they helped to articulate. And so they're not expressing concern at this time with me. I meet with the deans monthly, and we've covered the changes, and they see the benefit of those changes and holding their programs accountable and making sure teachers have the knowledge they need.
Thank you. Board Member Earl?
Yeah, I'll be quick. And I understand and appreciate Dr. Dixon's perspective on this. I do think, in my perspective, that we should be empowering local coaches to be following through. It's that key follow-up, and not state coaches to coach the coaches to follow up with this. And in my opinion, and maybe I'm not understanding that correctly, that's the difference in my mind, is that we should empower those local coaches and those professionals to then assist the educators in following through.
Thank you. I've got board member, okay, it is 2:04, everyone. Vice Chair Davis, yes.
I had a quick follow-up, but I was muted. I apologize. Just for Dr. Thompson, how many deans are we meeting with? Because I'm getting the opposite feedback. And so I'm confused where the disconnect is.
We meet with all of the education deans. So for all 8 universities that have teacher preparation programs in Utah. So if they're expressing differences, they've not expressed those to me in our conversations. So we review this bill every month and we just reviewed it last week. And
Yeah,
just to be
I've heard
clear,
from two.
Yeah, with the
Thank
board,
you.
with the board, we have had unanimous support from the LEAs for this bill. They all, JLC, Charter, they've all said yes to this bill. So in terms of local control, they see the flexibility. And then the coaches aren't coaches of coaches. They are going to coach in the lowest performing schools to try and elevate those student learning outcomes through developing teachers. And the bill also provides professional learning for coaches on how to deliver professional learning that meets adult learning theory, how to work with families. So there are pieces to support all coaches in Utah in this bill. So those are things that I wanted to make sure were understood.
Thank you. I know you're not Angie, Chair Huntsman.
Thank you.
There you go. No.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you recognizing me. Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that we're out of time on support of this motion, and I move to previous question.
Okay. That's not debatable. We are calling the question here. All those, please vote if you're in favor. I'll vote. Everybody vote to call the question, previous question. I believe that was unanimous. Vice Chair, I didn't see yours, but is that accurate? Yep. Okay. So the motion before the board is that the board support first sub SB 123 early literacy outcome improvements. I'm going to make a roll call vote on this. I think we're going to need to have that. So hold on, let me get my paper. Okay. Board Member Booth.
Yes.
Board Member Cannon. Board Member Klein.
No.
Vice Chair Davis.
No.
Board Member Earl.
No.
Board Member Hanson.
Yes.
Board Member Hart.
No.
Chair Huntsman.
Yes, please.
Board Member Hutchings.
No.
Board Member Hymas.
No.
Board Member Lear.
Yes.
Board Member Moss.
I'm a no.
Board Member Norton.
No.
Board Member Straight.
Yes.
So this motion does not carry. So I am going to consider this meeting adjourned. Thank you.